Good morning, Vietnam. If you don't know why I just said that, then please make sure you guys Google the movie Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. So on a more serious note, American involvement in Vietnam comes to you in three parts, brought to you by Tevi. So I would like to open up with the overview of foreign occupation. For Vietnam, similar to Cuba, had been occupied and colonized, and it's important to know the backstory. So guys can fill in that first introduction that the Chinese Empire had controlled Vietnam for thousands of years. In the late 1800s, France then ruled Vietnam, as well as neighboring Laos, that's Laos, and Cambodia. And this region was known as French Indochina. And then finally, in 1940, Japan invaded Vietnam. I think it's important to note this history of invasion. I chose this picture of all my images, of course, for a reason. I want you to analyze this. We are small, but not reconciled to China's invasion. So, the Vietnamese have a strong history of resentment to foreign occupation. Please keep this in mind as we pursue our place in this country. And under number one, I need you to know the geography of this region and answer this question: why did Vietnam matter? For if you look at this map, Malaysia, let's go right down here, is important for the resources it contained was rubber and tin, which would be used for Western industry. Also, please look, let's see where it is, the Strait of Malacca, which is right here near Malaysia. Guys, the Strait of Malacca put down is a huge world's shipping lane. So it's important to control this strait. You guys should know that South Vietnam was a place that Japan, located way up here, imported rice from. So Vietnam's important to Japan. Remember from my intro, Indochina is this whole region, and it's important also for oil for Japan. So Japanese not only need rice from the southern part of Vietnam, but they also import their oil from many places in Indochina. And lastly, for number one, do you know what the domino theory is? For our main foreign policy, besides containment, is the fear that if one of these countries, such as Vietnam, falls to communism, it will create a domino effect. Just like dominoes in the game, communism will spread to neighboring countries like Cambodia, Thailand, Laos. Obviously, we saw the domino effect with China and with Korea. For number two, the growth of Vietnamese nationalism. Again, guys, please look at this image carefully. By the early 1900s, the Vietnamese began to resist foreign rule. They formed several political parties to push for independence. I hope you looked carefully at how the Vietnamese reacted to their colonial rulers. I do want to discuss this image. If you haven't looked carefully, please look at the center. So again, remember the building resentment, the boiling almost over effect of foreign occupation. And as resentment builds, here is the answer. So Vietnamese nationalism continues with a leader, a very important leader. So he became the leader of the nationalist movement for almost 30 years. Nguyen Tat Thanh, better known as Ho Chi Minh, is pictured here on the right. Some important things to know about him is that in 1919, he presented a petition for independence at the Treaty of Versailles, but it was ignored. He later visited the Soviets, where he became in favor of communism. In 1930, he returned to Indochina and helped found the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, and he worked to overthrow the French rule. And then once Japan invaded his country, he organized a nationalist group called the Viet Minh. Very important to note this group. They become important later on. It united, guys, both communists and non-communists because they had a common enemy, right? In order to kick out the Japanese, they united. The U.S. began sending aid to the Viet Minh. Number 3 is escalation, where it says America aids the French. So guys, when Japan surrendered World War II, it gave up control of Indochina. Ho Chi Minh quickly declared independence. However, France, the former ruler, refused. They did not want to give up their colonial empire. The French troops returned in 1946 and drove the Viet Minh into the countryside. Continuing, guys, the Viet Minh slowly fight back to regain control of their country, and France then appeals to the U.S. for help. Remember, this is after World War II, and we are trying to be in charge of containment. So this put America in a tough position. So, we opposed colonialism because we had supported India, in their freedom away from Great Britain. But we didn't want Vietnam to be communist. So we're kind of torn. There are 2 events that convinced Truman to help France. First is the fall of China to communism. As I had said earlier, that really worried the American public and our government. And also, guys, the outbreak of the Korean War showed that containment was not working. And so the next president, Eisenhower, continued this policy known as the domino theory, which I had sort of asked you guys in the beginning. And it is the idea that if Vietnam falls to communism, then the rest of Southeast Asia would follow suit. And many of you probably will not get to Vietnam, but it's a great place to travel to. I just included this slide because it's ironic that in Vietnam you have French architecture. So remember what the Vietnamese did to the French? Let me go back a bit. Okay, so again, bitter resentment, fighting back, desperately wanting their independence, yet this twisted blend of culture, right, being brought to their country from Europe. So the Vietnamese had had enough. Number 4 is very important. It's called the defeat at Dien Bien Phu. And so under number 4, you guys need to know that the French struggled against the Viet Minh, who used guerrilla tactics. And just to review, guerrilla warfare, you guys may know, from the American Revolutionary War, from the Minutemen, but this is a little different. It's very irregular warfare or tactics, such as ambushes. But what really set them apart is they used irregular troops to confuse and blend into the civilian population, making it difficult for armies to fight. The war was very unpopular in France because of heavy casualties. The French commander decided to seize a mountain town known as Dien Bien Phu. It's kind of like their last chance. This would interfere with the Viet Minh's supply lines. So Dien Bien Phu had strategic importance, guys. So it would force them to come out into the open. Remember, they're hiding on us, on the French. And so they want to interfere with that, and they want to bring them out into the open. However, it backfired, and they got surrounded. On May 7th, 1954, the Viet Minh surrounded the French at Dien Bien Phu. And this convinced the French to surrender and withdraw from Indochina. Quick recap, guys. After World War II, after Japan left this country, 1946, France moves back in, and then from 46 until 54, the French are fighting the Viet Minh and finally lose. And lastly, guys, number 5, the Geneva Accords I want you to know about. Negotiations to end this conflict were held in Geneva, Switzerland. The Geneva Accords divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel, with Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh in control of the north, and a pro-Western regime in control of the south. In 1956, elections were supposed to be held to unite the country under a single government. Once the French troops left, the U.S. became the main protector of the new government in the south, led by a nationalist leader named Ngo Den Diem, which is pictured there on the right. So I'm going to just go with Diem. He was pro-West and fiercely anti-communist. He was Catholic, and he welcomed almost 1 million North Vietnamese Catholics to escape Ho Chi Minh. So he is our ally, Diem. The elections mandated by the Geneva Accords never took place. In a special referendum, Diem became president of the new Republic of Vietnam. Remember, that's in the south. He didn't permit the elections because he feared Ho Chi Minh would win and unite the country under his rule, under communism. Eisenhower approved, remember, they're allies, and increased American aid to the South. And at this point, guys, aid just means, military aid without troops, almost like we're training their troops. This is Tevi signing off. I will see you all tomorrow.